away.
Karibu musibire muta mwasibye mutya amahoro agandi byaibo habari gani muraho sangonini kopango odeo. For those of you who are wondering what that was, these are some of the various local greetings found in East Africa's diverse languages. Welcome to She Center, the female podcast, where I dive into the issues and experiences that affect women everywhere. I am your host, Resty Kansiime, and I am passionate about creating a safe space for women to share their stories and triumphs. I want to thank you for tuning into my podcast, and I would love for you to join our community and stay connected with us beyond this episode. You can find us on Instagram at _SheCenter_podcast and follow us on Facebook at the She Center Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and hit that follow and like button on our social media to be part of the conversation. I have a confession to make, guys. Since I am new to this podcasting thing and I hate public speaking, yes, this feels like public speaking to me. I recorded 3 1-hour-long audios for this first episode. I kept feeling like they weren't really communicating what I needed to communicate. I honestly write better than I speak. See, my mind tends to get in the way when I am being vulnerable with people that I do not know, and I find myself losing the point I am trying to make. I cannot tell you how many recordings I made for the short intro episode that I put out. I have over 6 audios in my laptop named Final Intro. For the moment, as we get to know each other, let us start with just me reading out everything that I want to say to you. So early this morning at 6, as more ideas came into my mind, I decided to get up, pick up my phone, and organize my brain. I wrote you a long letter from my heart so that I would keep myself in line and say all I needed to say. I hope you don't mind. Here it goes. Recognizing that vulnerability begets vulnerability, I understood the importance of sharing my own narrative before asking others to do the same. In this first episode, I am going to tell you my life story and my journey here. Like many stories you have heard, it was a challenging season that led me to discover my purpose, which is connecting and helping women through the She Center project. Growing up, I remember having a happy childhood, full of adventure. I was a very naughty and stubborn child. I was also constantly busy, always doing something. It was either talking, playing, or whatever came to mind. But as I grew up, starting from my late teen years, I started to feel misunderstood. I kind of lost myself in this big world and barely knew who I was. Life became harder and complicated. I started to struggle to fit in. In hindsight, I realized that some of my behavior and my sometimes terrible and irrational decisions were a coping mechanism. It was a way for me to deal with my surroundings. I realized that I never really sat down to feel or process the things that were happening because I was always on to the next thing, be it a job, a business, or even my relationships. I just simply lacked commitment. I had these tall walls built around myself to protect me. I struggled with being vulnerable. I just couldn't trust people no matter how lonely and frustrating I was, and I couldn't fully be myself in the spaces that I found myself in. They say that we are afraid to bring our authentic self to the table to show it to the world because we are afraid of rejection. That was really true in my case. Unfortunately, this coping mechanism went on into my adult life. It later transitioned to me always finding something to keep my mind off things. I avoided being alone with my thoughts. I hated thinking, still do. Sometimes some moments can get dark in an instant when you're trying to think about stuff. So I watched a lot of movies and series and listened to music to disappear into another world. I preferred hanging out in loud and busy places and talking with friends to avoid being alone. All this happened until 2020, the famous 2020, the year when all things I was used to doing were not possible. Let me tell you what happened to me in the famous 2020. I had plans. I had just turned 30 in February. My birthday is on the 25th. And my now husband had just proposed to me on my birthday. The future seemed brighter than brighter. I was writing my master's thesis, and I had plans to spend the next 6 months in the library and meeting up with friends after my reading schedule. Well, God must have laughed so hard at my plans because the week following my birthday introduced us to Auntie Rona. For those who don't know, that's Corona. The restrictions stopped us from social gatherings. Oh, I am an extrovert, so this was so hard. Suddenly, I was alone in my student's apartment with my thoughts. I cannot tell you how painful the first weeks were. At first, I had my phone to keep in contact with family and friends. This didn't really help much because I hated the messages that were being forwarded to me. But at least I kept up with everyone. One morning, I woke up and my phone battery was dead. I had to send my phone to the shop to get it fixed. It is in these few days when I finally had moments with my thoughts and feelings. It's like all the feelings I had dodged my whole life came to attack me. I found myself crying and looking for someone to blame for all the pain I was feeling. I couldn't call anyone. I don't think I wanted to anyways. So I did what I knew best, what my mom and my grandma told me. I knelt down and cried to God and blamed him for the pain. It's always easier when you blame someone, but I guess God can take it. In that moment, I felt like he was telling me that he would use my pain and that everything that had happened to me was going to later be a blessing. This didn't make sense at first. Later, I decided to find someone's online to watch. I needed someone to speak life into my pain. One of the sermons I came across was a message from T.D. Jakes, which talked about Joseph's life. That's in the Old Testament in Genesis. How he had to suffer, but eventually he ended up saving his nation. This started to feel like my confirmation that pain had a purpose. So I felt the need to pick up a book and start writing all the things that affected me and started to come up with solutions to how their impact could have been avoided. I have been doing this for 3 years. I call it my vision book. Okay, so in their transformative book, Oprah Winfrey and psychiatrist Dr. Bruce Perry underline the importance of asking individuals what happened to you, rather than focusing on what's wrong with them. They argue that our personal history, the people and the places that shaped us, greatly influence our brain development, making us utterly unique. I learned 3 lessons from this book. One is that what we experience during childhood has a profound effect on our brain as an adult. The second is that we learn positive regulation strategies later in life to help us deal with trauma. And the third and last is it is possible to overcome trauma with the right support. That is a trauma-informed community. I find all this to be true. So I will briefly tell you what happened to me. This is the question I'm trying to answer. Now, since I call this a safe space, I will be vulnerable and tell you about some of the painful things that happened to me, leading to the moment I have described in 2020, the moment when I cried to God and I felt all the pain that I've ever kept down, the moment when I knelt before God and felt my pain. This is the part in a Nigerian movie or in This Is Us where they say 30 years earlier. I will briefly talk about these experiences. I don't want to go deep in them, but I try to make it as informative as possible to give you an idea of my trauma and what I went through growing up. So it starts with my dad and mom separating when I was 4 years old. Thereafter, my sister and I grew up with our maternal family. That's my lovely grandma, my namesake, my aunties, that's my mom's sisters, her friends, and also their husbands, their partners, and my mom's brother, her young brother who was just at the university at this time. These people took on the job of supporting my mom, especially during the first years when she had separated with my dad, and later on when my mom traveled to Germany. They were able to take on the role to take care of us and helped my mom to be at peace during her time away. My sister and I lived a life of nomads. We both have the village life experience at my grandma's and the big city life experience. My village experience was an adventure which involved digging, taking care of animals. It involved taking care of animals, involved milking them, the cows, and holding cow dung in my hands when we were cleaning the kraal, climbing trees, fetching water from the well, which once led to my falling and almost drowning. That was really traumatic. Turns out my sister missed out on many of my adventures, like climbing trees and falling in the well, because she was such a responsible goody two-shoes. She still is. My city life experience involved hanging out with my cool cousins whose lives I admired. I taught them all my cool local games from boarding school and from the village and told them stories of everything that happened outside their life. I wanted their life so bad, but turns out they found my life so cool. In the city, we visited and lived with so many relatives. This was an adventure, but it made me feel like I didn't belong anywhere. I guess this is why I tend to be a people pleaser. My mom was young when she took on the responsibility to raise us on her own, probably in her mid 20s or late 20s. I think that's young because I'm older than that right now, and it would be really hard to take on two kids. So she did the best she could. She couldn't have us home all the time, so she sent us to boarding school. I went to a boarding school from the ages of 7 to 19 when I finished my high school. This is quite normal in Uganda. For the most part, that is from 7 to 17 years, I went to only girls' schools. During some years in school, especially before I turned 16, paying school fees on time was a struggle. My mom really tried her best. Thank God that we had two mothers. My mom's twin sister, who had earlier traveled to America, decided to take on the role of supporting us. She always tried to help my mom out financially where she couldn't. I also faced bullying, physical abuse from caretakers, our teachers. There was a lot of canings. I have so many scars over my body. And I developed a perfectionist personality because in school they rewarded performance, not character. They still do, unfortunately. So I was often overwhelmed. Many of us were, to be honest. Like, they wanted all of us to be the best in class, and we were caned according to what you failed. It was also very lonely since we spent most of the year in school and only got to get 2 to 3 weeks holidays, plus 1.5 months at the end of the year. It's here that I developed my independent skills and a very thick skin to survive. I was among the shortest kids in each class I attended in primary, which made me a target for bullying. I did use my voice and character to defend myself, so yes, hence my aggression sometimes, then defense mechanism. When I was 13, my mom, my hero and my everything, left the country with my two young siblings and came to find a better life for us in Germany. The plan was we would follow a few years later, but we never did. I never felt more alone than in this season of my life. I felt abandoned once again but I understood she had to go to provide for us. Also, she really tried to keep in touch while she was away by sending us pictures and letters. I have so many albums. And later on, Facebook and WhatsApp saved our family, and we started to communicate more often and instantly with her in our teenage years. I later went to mixed school when I was 17, where I felt more lost than ever. It was so hard to fit in because I was afraid of boys. I literally used to run away from boys. When I finally got the guts to talk to a few boys and made some friends on the other side of the gender, someone passed a rumor around that emotionally damaged me and caused me to lose trust and feel more abandoned by my peers. I also later experienced what they call slut shaming. A few people, girls, felt it was fun to write hurtful things about me in the girls' toilet and on the classroom desks. This emotionally affected my identity, how I saw myself and how I saw everyone else. I withdrew and started to trust no one. This is the time when I learned how to journal. I also developed social anxiety, which led me to drinking. I was already of age at this point, 18 plus, so I was legally accepted to drink. But unfortunately, I wasn't drinking because of, I'm 18, trying it out, I'm old enough. I was only doing it to deal with the social anxiety, and also it was due to peer pressure. I also hated this school, which affected my performance. So it was a really dark season in the 2 years leading to my high school graduation. I later joined the university and struggled more than ever to fit in. I continued drinking to fit in and saw that social anxiety that I had developed in high school. I struggled with navigating relationships and the freedom that I had. It was quite hard, to be honest. Everything was hard from the time my mom left because we never really had anyone to go back home to and say, this is what's happening. So I just learned to deal with everything on my own. I only ever shared whatever I was going through with my 2 cousins who were my closest friends. And yeah, we were young. What could we tell each other? How could we help each other? I never got any counseling. I never got anything. I simply just moved on. After university, I took a part-time job working in remote villages in the west of Uganda on 2 projects, school-related gender-based violence and early grade reading. It was here that my perspective began to change. I encountered a lot of young children who were going through bullying. During my interviews, I remember particularly I encountered 3 girls. One was being raped by her dad constantly, and the community couldn't do anything about it. Another girl was abandoned by her dad. I interviewed her and she told me that she was willing to sleep with border men, motorcyclists, if they were willing to give her what she needed that her dad couldn't give her. And the other girl was probably in nursery school and she was being sexually harassed by her stepfather. Her sister, who was 3-4 classes ahead of her, told us, and when we asked the mom if she knew about it, the mom said it wasn't true, and that apparently her daughter was trying to compete with her for her man. So my perspective really changed, and it was then that this seed was planted in me to want to help women. Those 3 stories stuck with me until now. I also, on the side, in addition to my part-time job, which often happened twice a year for a month or 3 weeks every time, I also, on the side, ran a business selling clothes from the UK. I helped my friend sell her makeup, and I also sold insurance products at the same time. I really hustled. I was always on the motorcycle and moving around. It was always a busy time, but I loved it. I got to meet so many people. I learned a lot of marketing skills and sales. Later on in 2017, I moved to Germany for further studies and finally got to be close to my mom. I can't tell you what that meant to me. I stayed with her for 8 months, and I eventually moved to another city where I struggled once again to fit in, being the only African in my master's program. It was a culture shock. I continued drinking to deal with social anxiety until 2020, where this story started. Okay, so let's fast forward back to 2023, which is right now. These are a few lessons that I have learned from my past experience. I am far from perfect. I don't claim to have always been a victim of the circumstances in my life. I also realize that because of my trauma and pain, I may have perceived some things in the wrong way, and that I didn't see the whole picture or give other people the same grace that I badly sought from them. I also realized that while I was hurting, I also hurt other people in my life. I am still dealing with all this as I grow mentally and spiritually. I even had to make some tough phone calls to some people to apologize for the wrongs I did to them. For the people who hurt me, I have chosen to forgive them and accept that they too may be struggling with their own childhood trauma, which led them to hurt me, especially my dad and those that bullied me in school. I am still learning that words are powerful. Sometimes we verbally bully people and affect their whole life without knowing. It is important the story we tell ourselves is another lesson that I have learned. How we see the world through the lenses of our trauma can cause us to tell ourselves lies such as, I am not loved, I am rejected, and I'm not enough. I have also learned and I have also accepted the fact that we are all doing the best we can with what we have been given. As I journeyed down the road to recovery, I started to not only heal, but to accept my past as it is and chose to move on to a life that has so much to offer. I realized I was placed on this earth for a purpose, and that's to help others, especially women. I also learned to set emotional boundaries, and I am trying to stop putting high expectations on people to protect myself from hurt when they let me down. In addition to writing down everything painful that had happened to me, I started to write down things that had happened or were happening to the women I knew or those I had known before, even those I was encountering along the way. And last year, it all finally made sense what I had to do. I found out that I needed to start a female platform to help women thrive, starting with women in my homeland, Uganda, and then spread out to East Africa. I intended to help women worldwide, but I have to take it one step at a time. However, through this podcast, I know that I can reach women everywhere. This and social media are one of the most powerful tools in our generation, so I intend to use them to my advantage. There was a problem though. I didn't feel like I was equipped to do any of the things I wanted to do. I didn't have the working experience, the IT skills, the project management skills, or leadership skills. I didn't think I had what it took, so I tried to push this vision onto other people who didn't seem to get it. I can't count how many people I tried to sell this vision to partner with me or to take it on. Finally, I realized that I was on my own. This was my cup of tea. Eventually, I had to decide to start with what I had. That's my life experience, the personal contacts in my life. I figured that if I made this my mission, I would learn all there is to do what I needed to do. I still feel that doubt creeping in sometimes, reminding me that it's impossible, but I have learned to ignore it and keep going. In addition, in these last 3 years, I have dived into self-help and personal development. I have religiously read various books, thanks to the encouragement from my husband who loves to read. Some of these books include the Bible, articles and journals, videos on YouTube, mental health podcasts and other podcasts. I even tried therapy, all to heal and understand my pain and to develop the skills and knowledge that I do not possess. Therapy is quite expensive, so I took a break. Philosopher, the late Jim Rohn, says that self-confidence comes from feeling good about yourself, knowing at the end of the day that you did your best. Listening to him teaches me that change on the inside, working hard on myself, and developing skills is all I need to do to succeed. He says, keep developing yourself until something changes. That's your attitude, your communication, your personality, your language, and your ability. I have also reviewed different sermons and read the Bible to inform my articles for my blog. You can check it out, myfavoritesermons.life. These have opened my eyes to the fact that when we are chosen to carry out a purpose, we never really start out believing we have everything we need. We start out looking at what we don't have. But I have learned that God provides for us as we go. All we need is the faith to start and to keep going, no matter what our thoughts say or what other people tell us. Stories like that of Joseph, Gideon, Moses, and so many others showed me this. This has helped me a lot. It has kept me going. In addition, I have read autobiographies like that of Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther, Mahatma Gandhi, which were recommended by my favorite mental health podcaster, Dr. Anita Phillips. These men, against all odds, managed to persevere through and live out their purpose. Furthermore, I read a book from T.D. Jakes called Soar, which is intended to help people get their vision from the ground up. In this book, he explored stories such as those of companies and those who invented products. Some of the stories in his book were about the Wright brothers. If you don't know them, these are the American aviation pioneers, generally credited with inventing, building, and flying the world's first successful motor-operated airplane, as well as Coca-Cola's John Pemberton, who substituted sugar syrup for wine. While tinkering with the formula, he accidentally mixed his concoction with carbonated water. After testing it, he decided to market the beverage as a fountain drink instead of a medication, naming it Coca-Cola after its original ingredients. These stories have showed me that if you give it your all, you will succeed at something. And some of the things that you succeed as might be a mistake, and that doubt is going to come, but you just have to keep going no matter how many times you failed, like the Wright brothers did. It hasn't been a smooth ride, to tell you. After my master's, I started working at a fast food restaurant. Last year, I got a job at a startup, which is an online marketing platform, and I lost the job early this year, end of March. These things disrupted my plans, but being the person that I am, I wasn't about to let them interrupt my mission. While at the restaurant, I kept collecting data and writing down notes on the cashier's receipts during breaks and at times where we had no clients coming in. I stapled them at the back of my book. You can hear them or have a look. Yes. I was the cashier most of the time, so I kept my receipts as a remembrance to show that you can never stop dreaming. You can do it when you're doing the lowest job. Just keep thinking, just keep dreaming, and always make sure you write down everything that comes to mind. After I lost my job in March, I decided to not apply for jobs, but to fully give myself to the project planning. Interestingly enough, during this unemployment season, I have accomplished so much in this past 6 months. Talk about turning lemons into lemonade. Okay, so I leveraged my experience from the companies that I have worked for to develop the idea for the digital female platform that will hopefully be launched next year. I started to take online classes and utilize YouTube tutorials, AI, that's artificial intelligence, to teach myself all the skills I needed to write my ideas into a proposal and shared it with people who helped critique it. I even held a female focus group discussion to choose the name for the platform. Thanks, guys. She Center was chosen after a focus group discussion, and I gathered some ideas from these ladies as well, which have helped to develop this project. In this episode, I have shared my spiritual awakening journey and how I have managed to conquer my fear of past trauma and pain. I also shared the lessons I have learned. During the healing process, I have discovered the gifts I possess. I am a great encourager and motivator. I believe this stems from the fact that I love to talk and that I have overcome a lot, and that I have the persistent attitude which will make me not give up on reaching out to people I know are in need. I am also a good visionary. I easily come up with ideas that often produce great results. I guess this stems from the fact that I also love to disappear in my mind and come up with creative ways to deal with difficult moments. Lastly, I can tell you that when you know what your purpose is, everything else that happens outside your plans is either an opportunity or a distraction that needs to be ignored. We need to be intentional about the things we give our time. So, if you've made it this far, I want to thank you for your patience and for giving me the space to share my story. Please let me know how this episode has impacted you. Share your experiences with me as well. If you aren't already following or subscribing to this podcast, please do, and also rate and review. I promised that I would be bringing female guests from different backgrounds, so join us next week as I host my first guest, who is none other than my mother, who will be sharing her life's journey with us and telling us how her experiences have shaped the woman that she is, my hero. Thank you all for listening. This is She Center, the female podcast, where women's stories matter. I love you all. God bless you.